Welcome to the dojo, baby. This is Joe Doe. Welcome to the
This podcast is brought to you by Emotional Damage.
Welcome to the Zoom food. Yeah. Step and wipe your feet. This a focus zone. White belt.
Okay, welcome to Zoom Food. This is Joe Man. I'm here with my guest, Jason Shipley. Jason, thank you for being with me today. I just want to start with a simple question. How are you, man?
I'm fantastic. I always choose to be fantastic, no matter what's happening.
Beautiful. So just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do, and please share your story with us. And then let's just start there. I've been hearing that you have a crazy story, and I'm just curious to know, what that is.
When you're in it, it's just your life, right? Like, so you think it's just normal. Everybody else thinks it's a crazy story, but you're like, oh, this is just, who I am and how I've lived my life. So I don't know. I mean, going back to, I was born and raised in Kansas, and I think I learned a lot from that. I learned a lot about hard work and family values and all, and that was a great place to be from. But I just hated winter. Every winter I would be like, oh, no, not again. So, almost 3 years ago now, well, just over 3 years ago now, I moved to Florida. So that was kind of a dream come true of mine. I went to a Tony Robbins event, and I was like, I just made a decision, and I'm like, I'm just doing this, So that was beautiful. But there's been a lot of missteps and maybe even hardships along the way that I think everybody encounters, different levels of pain or different levels of problems in their life, So anyway, basically, I was hoping to always be successful, right? So I remember from a young age, my parents always were, I love my parents. They were very loving. They were very kind. I didn't know my dad that well growing up, but, until I was like probably 12, he took an early retirement, and I was able to actually spend more time with him. But before that, he was working 18-hour days, so we didn't really get to connect that often. But realistically, no matter what happens in someone's life, if you always have the will to win, you find a way or you make a way. And so I was always looking for that. Even from a young age, I was kind of an entrepreneur. I would sell mechanical pencils to all my classmates at school, or I even had a spinach growing operation at one time. So I was always looking for ways to, make a buck or be an entrepreneur. And I think that was just kind of the spirit that was in me. My parents, my mom was a teacher. My dad worked as an accountant part-time at one place. Then he worked as a maintenance supervisor at a bakery. So he was always very hands-on, very, hardworking. And I knew he was hardworking when he retired. He took early retirement, and they had to have 3.5 people, he said, replace him because, they had one part-time and 3 full-time people that had to do what he was doing. And I'm like, probably weren't paying you enough. So anyway, it's one of those things where I realized early on that hard work is good, but you also have to figure out how to work smart. I started finding ways. I was just seeking mentorship. I was seeking ways of just learning, what do I need to know to do better, to just, get ahead. And so I started studying. I read Think and Grow Rich. I read, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I read every book I could get my hands on, basically, So Awaken the Giant Within was a big one for me with Tony Robbins. And that kind of helped me to understand. I didn't quite understand everything at the level I do now because I hadn't been through all of his programs. But as far as, just learning and growing, like I was looking for anything and everything I could possibly find. So I got involved in like network marketing, and I got involved in all sorts of ways, but mostly just to help me find a mentor, help me find somebody that could just take me to the next level, right? And I wasn't necessarily looking for somebody that was already a billionaire or something like that would be great, but somebody that could take me to just the next level. What is the next level, And I would always compare myself, even if I was 20, I compare myself against these 65-year-olds and be like, man, they're so far ahead of me. Well, of course, they have 40 years of experience. But, it was one of those things where I didn't quite understand that, time works for you or it works against you. And over time, I have learned to let time work for me. And it's one of those things where I just started a business and kept going, and then I would sell that or shut it down, or, COVID came along, or like first there was a housing crisis. I had a company where I was doing windows, siding, doors, roofing, and, the housing crisis came along and pretty much just had to shut that thing down. And that wasn't comfortable, and then I got into real estate. We started buying real estate, and I started buying rental properties. I had $4,000 I'd saved up, and I walked into a property management company and I said, I'm Jason Shipley, and I'm a real estate investor, and I just need to start buying some properties. He said, well, how many are you looking for? I said, well, how many, that we could work something out on? And he found a guy that would do a owner carry for me. And so we ended up buying, I think we bought 16 at once with that $4,000 down. I went and found a bunch of them that needed a bunch of work. And so we got into it. And then I did so well with those, just turning them around and rehabbing them and doing all the work myself, that another person that he managed for, my property manager, he had some more units. And so I ended up getting up to like 38 units with $4,000 down. So that was a big leverage point that I learned, early on how to basically get, it wasn't no money down, but it was a very little amount of money down for how many, units I had. But then I had a management problem and understanding, that maybe not everybody is always working in your best interest. You do sometimes need to work off contracts, and, understanding that sometimes you do have to you got to understand that everybody does not see the world the way you see the world. You can see the world and you're thinking, hey, everybody's out to win and we're all here for each other. Some people are just there for themselves. So he ended up taking a lot of money, and he'd be going to Vegas all the time. And I was like, well, good for him. Well, I didn't know it was on my money. And so he was, changing every toilet valve 3 times. And, light bulbs were $80 to replace this because we had to go get a ladder. And I'm just like, this doesn't quite add up, So started figuring things out. But by that time, it was pretty much too late. And then the housing crisis hits, and I have a construction company and rental properties, and we pretty much lost everything. And so I actually worked at a cemetery. I managed a cemetery because I was like, what's the most secure thing you could possibly have? The economy's down, so I went and worked at a cemetery for a while, and was an assistant manager on sales there, and, did all sorts of at need, like you just do funerals and stuff. And you got to see a lot of grief, a lot of, reality check in life of what life's all about. And from there, I actually was called off of a LinkedIn. Like, people found me on my profile and they were like, hey, we see you have some engineering background, which, I'd studied electrical and computer engineering, never really used it, but I was like, yeah, I have some engineering background. I have some sales background. And so like, well, we want you to come interview for us. And it was an equipment company. I went and interviewed with them, and we worked out a deal. And so I started in the equipment business, and that was in 2012. And so started early 2012 and I said, I may not know anything about the equipment business, but I'll learn something new every day. And I said, I guarantee you in 3 to 5 years, I'll know more than you do. He was like, well, I've been doing this for 30 years, but I was like, I'm determined, I'm committed, and I'm going to make it happen. And so within 3 years, I probably did know about as much as him. Within 5, I was probably just pushing the boundary on everything. Right. And so it was one of those things where I learned that if you just stay after it, you're going to learn. And so did that, built that up. And then, over time, I made him a lot of money, I think, but he and I didn't see eye to eye on everything. And so that's okay. It's just, I at the time, it was uncomfortable for me because I was like, oh man, I don't really want to leave. I don't want to do anything. So I started my own business on the side, and we, started doing just, basically somewhat congruent work, but not exactly the same things. We do just metal fabrication. And then I started designing my own components and my own equipment. And I eventually got to a place where I was like, I can invent stuff and just draw it on a sheet of paper and put it together, and it works. And it was really satisfying in that way. And we built that company. And then I eventually left my job, and I, was out doing my own thing. And so then ended up joining, Tony Robbins Platinum Partnership. And it was right after COVID. I saw he was doing a live event. I'm like, a live event? Tony Robbins is still doing live events? I had to go see him. And so went and saw him, and then we ended up signing up for Platinum Partnership, which is basically where you do everything, every event he does for an entire year. You're just attending everything. So every 3 or 4 weeks, you're gone. It's kind of a crazy travel schedule, really breaking all your patterns because you're in a whole new environment. You're with people who are at a way higher level. They're at your level or way above, and it makes you grow so fast, And so I went through that program that it was life-changing for me. I mean, when I say life-changing, I mean, I was already on a fast path of growth. But once I made that commitment, it was like, if you hadn't talked to me in a month, it's like you haven't talked to me in a year. It's like I was on such an accelerated time frame, like boom, 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 we're just doing this, And so when I moved to Florida, we still had the business in Kansas, and we were, basically doing sales. I was doing that remote. But anyway, I had a business partner that I still don't know to this day exactly what the motivation was, but basically he and I did not see eye to eye because he was, I don't know if he was trying to steal the company from me or if he was trying to just make me look bad, but basically he ended up cooking the books to make it look like I was taking money that was for the business, but it was really, he's trying to make it look like I took it for myself. I'm like, well, dude, you're buying metal. I'm not buying that for me, you know? So anyway, irregardless, I wish him the best apart from me, you know, but, so anyway, he started going through all that. And in the midst of that, I had, worst day of my life happen actually. So, it was a Monday night. We were just sitting there eating, you know, getting ready to prepare for dinner, and the kids are playing in the pool. And I just, you know, stepped inside for about 20 seconds just to talk to Cece. And then I heard a scream, a blood curdling scream come from the pool. And I was like, And Tristan screamed a lot, but not like this was different. And so by the time I got to the door, he met me at the door and he said, it's Zaya. And I immediately like jumped into action, and I started just like going, what's going on, you know? And so Harrison brought her up out of the pool, and she had slipped out of her puddle jumper. So she had a, you know, one where you just have your hands that go through the little puddle jumper vest. And if you assume if it's sold in the stores, it's safe, but that's not a safety device. Like that's just not meant for what it was. So she had jumped in and she'd slipped out of her puddle jumper and went straight to the bottom of the pool. And Harrison pulled her out. So now I'm like screaming, like getting everybody rounded up and just like, hey, you know, you need to call 911. We need to do this. And like just the chaos, right? You're trying to stay focused and calm and remember everything about CPR. And you're like hyper focused on like the situation. And, you know, I was just like trying to see every detail that I possibly could and pay attention and guide everything. And you know, she's like, they're going to be here in 5 minutes. And I'm like, 5 minutes is too long. We live right around the corner from the fire station. Let's just go. And so I made the decision. I'm like, we're just going. And so we did. We took her to the fire station. By the time they got the call, I was walking in, you know, with Zaya in my arms, and I felt so helpless in that moment. You know, like it feels like you're in a movie. You're running in, you know, my daughter, I'm like trying to do CPR while I'm, you know, just running in saying, help me, and feeling like I am helpless. And I don't have this. And, you know, I'm the guy that always has it all together. And here I am, and I've got nothing together. I have nothing, you know, and I really was in that moment. It hit me like, this is serious. Like I knew it was serious before, but you're in such action mode that you can't get to a point where you're not experiencing it, you know? So that was a very impactful day, because then we ended up going to the hospital and getting her over there. And then we just kept holding out hope, you know, and Harrison, my littlest, he's like, she's going to be okay, right? I'm like, yeah, she's going to be fine. You know, everything's going to be okay. But I didn't know, you know, and then they're like, okay, they think they have a pulse. I'm like, okay, she has a pulse. And so I'm like updating everybody on, you know, group chats and just calls. And I remember, you know, just going to the hospital and walking in there with her and going through the process. And 1 minute goes by, 2 minutes goes by, and they just keep going and keep going. And you're like, okay, she's going to make it. She's going to make it. Just, you have this hope. And then eventually you start to realize like, she may not make it. Maybe this is real. And so she didn't make it. And that was the day my world just fell apart. And I realized that life isn't fair. People say life's not fair, and it's really not. It's really not. Everybody has pain and grief and sorrow and loss, but there are different levels of pain, and it's not something I wish on anyone, you know, but that's a reality that was a club I never wanted to join. And when I did, everything changed, you know, because my mom, I had seen her lose my brother, and it devastated her life. And I just thought, I have to find a way through this. I have to find a way through this for my kids. I have other kids to raise. I've got other, you know, I've got a family still. I've got a business that everything's relying on me, and I have to figure this out. I can't just stop. And I was in the middle of running a 5K every day. And the next morning, you know, it just felt so surreal. It was like, I I woke up and I'm like, was that all a dream? And I sat at the bottom on a couch at the bottom of the stairs, because she always came out of her room and said good morning. And I was just waiting and waiting and waiting for like an hour. I just sat there and I'm like, is she going to come out and this was all a dream? And finally I was like, I've got to go on a run. I almost quit on myself. I'm like, everybody understand if you quit today. I'm like, but what about me? Would I understand if I quit on myself? So I put my shoes on, I laced them up, and I went on a running, blubbering, crying mess of an emotional whirlwind, right? And yeah, so I just ran and then came back, and, you know, you run out of the the neighborhood and the news is there, right? And they're covering, you're like, can I just have a second to breathe? Like, man, I don't even know if this is real or not. And here you're getting these reinforcements that it's real, but you just are disconnected from your body. It's like you're living in this emotional world, and then this is the reality that you thought existed, and feels like it's all just made up and everything's make believe. So you start to really, I was very grateful in that moment. I had been through Tony Robbins program, and I'm thankful I applied everything. I had applied anchoring. I had applied all the tools and resources he gives you, because I see a lot of people who just go in and they're just there for, looking pretty or whatever. I don't know what they're there for, but for me, I was there to learn, and I was there to apply. And I was so grateful that I had built that into myself, that I had those positive anchors, that I could collapse negative anchors. I learned how to utilize those tools. And I went back through and I listened to every program again, over and over. And I just worked and worked and worked. And it was during that time that I went to a Plaid event, or went to a Tony Robbins event. And then I met a Plaid, and they're like, you need to talk to Master Co. And I was like, I've seen Master Co. Like I've been thinking I need to talk to him. And I would like, that's something I put on my bucket list. Like, okay, I'll get to that eventually. But then it was like, no, this is a must. And Master Co said, I'm happy to do healing on you. But you need to come to Healer's Mastery. I was like, I'll be there. So I came to Healer's Mastery. He did massive cleansing on me, helped pull out all sorts of negative thought forms and emotions and things that I didn't even know existed. Right. And that helped me heal so much. Like that was life-changing for me. Absolutely life. And, the other day I was talking with somebody, I was like, I'm so blessed to have all these tools, but it doesn't necessarily stop the pain. I still feel pain. I still feel the loss, the sorrow, but it's not as pervasive. It's not so deep that it stops me in my tracks. I'm like, man, that was a beautiful moment. I just appreciate it. I accept it. And I'm like, man, that was great. I'm so grateful I got 3.5 years with her, and I still miss her, but you can't go back in the past. You can't make any changes there, right? Nothing I do or say is going to bring her back. So it's forcing acceptance, right? And finding a peace in yourself that allows you to stair step out of that grief, right? There's tools, there's resources that allow you to say, I'm going to find a baby empowering meaning, and then I'll find a little bit better one, I'll replace it, and a little bit better one, and I'll replace it, and a little bit better one, I'll replace it. And I'll never forget my coach. I talked to him after this, and imagine being that coach, getting that call. And I told him what happened. He goes, man, I can't even imagine what you're going through right now. But he said, I had a friend that told me a story, and it really helped me. Maybe it'll help you. And it was about meaning. And he said, I choose to believe that, when Zaya wanted to come down and when you wanted to come down, you said, hey, I want to learn this in this lifetime. And God said, he told Zaya, man, that's going to be great. It's only going to take you 3.5 years to learn that. And I've got this perfect guy over here, Jason, and he needs to learn these lessons. You guys are going to be a perfect fit for each other. And I thought, I like that meaning. That's a beautiful meaning. I like that. So I chose that meaning, and I chose to hold on to that, because I'm like, you know what? It was so beautiful. She taught me to love in a way I didn't even know existed, right? So she taught me so much. She taught me more in 3.5 years than some people do in 80, right? So there's a beauty and joy in life. I became a prodigious noticer after that of every little detail. How green the grass is, the sunshine on my face, the wind in my hair. I'm like, man, this is nice. This was always here. How come I never noticed it? Because I wasn't paying attention. So I became a prodigious noticer, and I started finding ways to experience more beauty and joy every single day. And when I did that, my whole life improved. And now I was teaching my children to start noticing those little things. And it's just like, just stop a second. Look at this little snail, notice these little bitty details that they were here the whole time. That's what life's all about. I mean, yeah, you can have a jet and you can have all these, fast cars or whatever. Like everybody's chasing all these things. And it's like, things matter so much less to me now. In fact, money matters so much less to me now. The more money I make, the less I care about it. And that's the craziest thing to me, because I was so driven by money early on in my life. I just thought like, this is going to solve all my problems. And it didn't. But what it did do is it gave me perspective, So I think that's the short and skinny of my story. I basically lost everything and rebuilt it. I've lost many businesses. And basically, when Zaya passed, I pretty much didn't lose this business, but I pretty much lost everything in the business and then had to rebuild from nothing, And so now we are on a growth curve to 20x the company in the next 3 years. And we are growing, adding, we're now at 4 locations, and, it's been a beautiful growth journey. A lot of challenges that now we're even actively overcoming, so.
When you say you lost everything in the business, with the tragedy, what do you mean?
So like, we still had some clients, but basically, at that time, my fab shop, I let my business partner basically take the fab shop, and I said, "Hey, you just have that," and
Just didn't want to do it at the
I
moment.
just couldn't even mentally, like, I mean, I was just literally selling assets to live on. Like, I didn't sell anything pretty much. I think, we went from almost 5 million in sales to 500,000 in sales, right? So, I mean, you're still selling parts, you're still selling things, but I wasn't actively trying to do anything. And when you're the sales force, that's it, but you're not going to make any money doing that, so we had to let everybody go pretty much. And then it was just back to just me doing everything. And, so I went from nothing. Within 1 year, we went up to 21 people. Then when it backed off to about, let's see, we're at like 16 now, and then we're adding a couple more people. We'll probably be back up in that 30 to 40 people range here by the end of the year. But yeah, so I mean, we have a big growth curve, but then you learn a lot. You consolidate, and then you get more facilities, and you're like, oh man, this is a whole different level of management. And then you have to like figure out how to manage multiple facilities, different locations, different personalities, different challenges when it comes to financing, different challenges when it comes to cash flow, you know, bringing on like CFO services and understanding like, basically how to not just manage your cash flow, but predict it. And then where do you put your money into your marketing? How much R&D are you doing? Like there's just a lot of factors that you have to learn as you go.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds to me that, like you were already successful before Tony Robbins, and then you just came in, and maybe you just came and learned how to handle your emotions better. Maybe, like you learned like emotional mastery, like maybe you were.
Yeah, so I mean, I think for me, yes, there was emotional mastery, but true mastery never stops, right? Like you're always working on another level. But as far as, the things I learned from Tony, I was expecting Tony to fix my relationship, right? Like that's just straight up. Like I'm like, hey, he's gonna solve my marriage, like he's gonna fix all my relationship problems and solve all that, which long term, no, we actually realized that we were probably never, like not never supposed to be together. We were together for a purpose, to bring children into the world and to learn and grow from each other. And we acknowledged that. And so we separated amicably, and it was a beautiful gift. It is a beautiful gift. We're actually, I wouldn't say we're best friends, but we're very amicable. We're, as amicable as you could be in a divorce situation. And it's like we have no ill will for each other at all. We know like, hey, this is part of the plan. This is part of a divine plan that we didn't see. But yeah, it's beautiful.
You came in like, high powered entrepreneur, like high stakes, but your marriage was in shambles, and you're like, man, I need to figure out a way. And that's why you sought out Tony Robbins.
Yeah, I think that was part of I mean, I always wanted to have a friend group that basically was on my level, I guess you'd say. I think your friend group changes as time goes on, right? Like you're not best buddies with, you might have a high school friend or something, but you're not hanging out with the entire group of friends you were in high school, right? Because people change, people grow, and everybody's on a different growth curve. Well, for me, in my friend groups, I was always on the most accelerated time frame when it came to business, especially. I was like, hey, let's go, let's do this. And then like, I wanted a friend group where I could be like, let's go look at Ferraris. Like, and then like, I didn't have that, like in Kansas, especially growing up, like people they want everything to be hard. And it's like, life has to be hard. And I'm like, does it though? Like, does it have to be hard? And so, I mean, there are going to be hard things no matter what you do, but I don't think making it intentionally hard is a good thing, and that's kind of the Midwest way of just like, put your nose to the grindstone. Doesn't matter if you're a billionaire or trillionaire, which I respect that. I think that's a great, and I do have that work ethic where I always am going. For me, it's like, okay, my grandpa told me you can work half days and be successful. I'm like, oh yeah, tell me more. He goes, yeah, you can choose the first half or the second half. It's up to you. And so it's like, oh, half days meaning like an entire half of a day. Oh, I got it now. Wasn't talking 4 hours. He was talking 12. And so it was like, that was just normal. Like every day I'm teaching my children through my example, like you integrate work into your life. And so I'm like bringing them along on that journey. And it's like, hey, we can still have fun in the middle of the day, but dad has to get work done at night then, like If you want to play Roblox together for an hour in the middle of the day, fantastic, but I have to eat while I'm doing it, or I have to, figure out other ways to balance that. It's not really a balance, it's integration, right? Because there is no balance. To be successful, you got to do more by definition, obviously. You have to do more than everybody else is doing, or you're going to have the same results as everybody else. So you have to figure out a way to integrate all those components that are most important to you. I have my 8F philosophy of life, which is a way to balance it, but it's really not balanced. You're actually putting probably a few of those that are always in the calendar. They're kind of in idle mode. And you're like, okay, I'm going to get this to a certain point and I'm just going to maintain this. And I'm going to focus on this, this, and this. These three are the most important right now. Maybe it's my finances, my health, and my friends. Maybe you're low on in those areas. Okay, so maybe you're doing great in your faith life. Okay, so if you're doing great, you're like, I'm not going to go do 50 meditations a day. I'm going to do one every day. As long as I'm in maintenance mode, I'm like, I'm just going to do this every single day. Great, but you're not focusing on that. Now, there may be segments in your life where you're like, I'm going to go spend a week at a retreat and I'm going to meditate for a whole week. Okay. Well, that would be a week where you're empowering that F for faith, right? And you're really growing your spiritual walk. There may be another week where you're like, I'm kind of lax on my body, but I'm still running a 5K every day, but I'm not hitting the gym every day, because you're on vacation or something. But you're still in maintenance mode where you're still showing up and you're doing a 5K every day, or you're still doing something for your health, but you may not be optimizing like, hey, I'm going to have all my macros, my nutrition's on, I'm pre-packaging all my meals, all these things. Like you may not be at that level for that week, but you're still putting it in your calendar and you're still in that, I guess, I wouldn't say coast mode, but you're in a maintenance mode,
Yeah. That I've been listening to. There's an interview by James Clear and for where is this? Is a podcast? I forget the name of it, but it's like one of the most popular ones. And I've been listening to it over and over. So like he talks about something that he says like ambitious people they always like hallucinate about, okay, like what is the best performance I can have with this habit. But James Clear says it's like, don't like focus on what you can do on your best days, like because you're gonna have bad days. He says focus on what you can maintain on your worst day, and then focus on that, because you're gonna have peak days, but like you just want to focus on the consistency over time.
Right. Yeah.
He says that like peak performance gives you a great story, but he says that consistency is what gives you like the real change and the real results.
I would agree with that. Like the 5K, people are like, oh, are you competitive? And I used to be. The first year I was very competitive. I stopped being competitive after that. Actually, after Zaya passed, I was like, man, I'm just going to do it every day. If I can just get it done, if I can literally just get a 5K in, that's the standard, right? So after that, I was like, I don't even have to run the whole thing. Like I was like, if I jog half of it, like especially when like after she passed, I would have moments where I would just see nature, be on my 5K. And, before I'd be like, I'm trying to hit, an 8.5 minute mile or whatever. And then it's like, I just didn't care at all. I was like, I don't care if they're 12-minute miles, give you 15-minute miles. I don't even care. Like whatever, like I'm enjoying the process. I'm enjoying the journey and I'm showing up every single day and I'm determined to feel good now. Like when I go on that jog, I am really just clearing myself mentally. Sometimes I'll talk to friends. Sometimes I will listen to music. Sometimes I listen to an audiobook. But whatever it is, I'm clearing myself and I'm feeling good in that moment. Because I think the most important thing, people forget that how they feel right now is what they're attracting more of into their life, right? They're trying to focus on, I'm going to feel good when I get fill in the blank. No. Feel good right now. Say, man, I feel so great. I'm so happy and grateful right now. And I feel good right now. And that's when you're going to start bringing more and more in, is when you start feeling amazing in the moment.
Yeah. What I see here, like in your essence is like, you're committed to doing whatever it takes. Like even before now, like even when you were younger, you said you tried a bunch of stuff, like you built businesses and lost them. So, but what I see here, you told me if I'm wrong, but what I see is like a prioritization of working for money, like, and in your body too. I can see you're in great shape as well. So what is the drive that you've had like throughout your life that has driven you to work so hard and work so many hours, even before Tony Robbins, like you said, like you've had this has been a part of you since, since you were younger. So what is that?
I think, this is something I ponder often because I want my children to have a drive, right? And I remember the reason I was so driven is because my parents had other things figured out in their life, but they did not have money figured out. Like money was the one thing they just did not know anything about. Like I'm teaching them things when I'm 15, right? I'm researching. I'm like, guys, do you look at this? Like, how come you guys don't have your Roth IRAs set up? Like I'd be like, and I'm like this kid who's talking to him about finance stuff, and I'm like, I have to figure this out. I just have to figure out finances. Because it was the one thing that I thought, if you don't have economic freedom, there is no freedom. Like you've got to get some level. It doesn't have to be vast amounts of wealth, but you have to get some level of financial autonomy. And so for me, that was real estate that I basically built, that those assets into something, right? And so I was able to do that nights and weekends. I'd work all day at my day job, and then I'd grab some dinner, see the family, and then I'd be off, working on rental properties till midnight, and then I'd get up and do it all over again. And so that was, man, I was maybe getting 4 or 5 hours sleep a night, which, I know that's not healthy long term, but that's how I ended up doing it. Right. And I'd either flip a house or get a long-term rental or, so we ended up basically building our wealth that way, which allowed me to start my own business. And that allowed me also to buy like crypto miners and do all my other crazy stuff that, I ended up investing in. But then I became an investor in all sorts of things. After I did Tony Robbins Platinum Finance, I was very diversified because before that, pretty much all my wealth was in real estate, like every penny, and I was like, man, I got to figure out a way to spread this out a little bit. So we ended up, diversifying. And now actually I'm actively selling off real estate. I know that may be good or bad, doesn't matter, right? But I'm focusing all my efforts on my business because in order to build wealth, you concentrate wealth, right? You concentrate your efforts, your energy, all that. In order to keep it, you diversify. People talk about diversification, but they don't talk about concentration. Elon's wealth, Warren Buffett's wealth. Well, Warren Buffett may be a little different because he buys companies or whatever, but it's all in Berkshire Hathaway, right? Like, so you look at anybody, Mark Zuckerberg, he made it all in one company, right? Like all these guys who make it really big, they make it doing one thing really well. And then they take that concentrated wealth and they diversify it to where it's spread out more. But people forget about the concentration aspect in order to build the wealth.
Yeah. Gary Keller, the one thing
Yeah.
I remember after I read that book, I was like, man, what is my one thing? What is it? And then when I look at you, it seems to like not matter. It's just like whatever is in front of me, let me do it and focus on that and then just keep going.
So, yeah, so there is a little bit of that aspect, I guess, but you can make things congruent, right? So like right now, my main focus is on hammer mill parts, right? So we're trying to dominate in hammer mill parts. That's very congruent because we also build hammer mills. Okay. That means we also build other components that go in front of and behind that hammer mill. So you might need a conveying system. You might need an air system. You might need a cooler. You might need a pellet mill. You might need something that's going to go before or after that process. But the core thing we're focusing on is the parts business because the parts business allows us to build revenue long term that's repeatable. It covers all of our bases. And then when we sell a piece of equipment, that's just profit, right? Like it's going to go to the bottom line instead of that carrying us through as our operating expenses, right? So we have to find things that are congruent in our businesses that allow us to be successful, right? And same thing, like even with my Made in America Reawakened miniseries, that's congruent because it's making us a leader in the equipment business. So one thing flows into the other. So whatever you're focused on, just make sure that it's congruent because then it's going to be easy to switch to the second gear, third gear, fourth gear. Because once you have that part solidified, the parts business, you can hire somebody to go in and be like, okay, you're going to be running the parts business now. Now I can take my focus off that. I can go put it on the next thing,
Yeah. So it seems like, and it also seems like you didn't just like wing this. Like you said, you worked for somebody, then you learned so much, and then you modeled, and then you obviously you went off on your own, and then you made it your own.
Yeah.
But you so how important was that mentor, that guy that you worked for so long, into, before you transition into your own business?
So that part, he was not really my mentor so much as I watched. I mean, I did have other mentors in business,
Mm-hmm.
but he was a model of maybe not necessarily what not to do because he was a great human, right? Like he was a good human. He just didn't have the same vision I did, right? Like he inherited the company from his dad. So his dad had kind of built the business and he had the entrepreneurial spirit. And so he was more like, I just want to coast and like, just keep it business as usual. And I was very much the entrepreneurial spirit, like, let's blow this thing 100x. And so I asked him so many times for budgets for things or, like, hey, give me a marketing budget and I'll go out and kick ass. And he just didn't want to do it, which is fine. That was his choice. I had to recognize that eventually, oh, he doesn't want what I want. Okay, that makes sense. Right.
Mm.
And so I got to see that play out. I got to see that play out and in staying small. Right. Because he could have had a monster company. And I probably would have grown it for him. Right. Like I was just a good employee. I was like, hey, I kind of want to be an entrepreneur, but I kind of want to also grow your business. Like if you give me a piece of the deal, we can just do this together and let's go. And if he would have done that, I probably would have just stayed there and built that into a huge company. But that's not what the universe was calling me to do.
So did you model anything that he did, or like did you find somebody else to model, or did you just figure it
Yeah,
out?
I mean, there's always people to model, right? So you just pay attention, right? So there again, the prodigious noticer aspect, right? Pay attention to the details, like, oh, what this company did, that was genius. Okay, so take that, and this company, oh man, they're doing this. Okay, take that. Now here's the real thing. Ooh, that guy's screwing up here. I shouldn't do that. Definitely don't do that. Okay, this company is pissing everybody off. Okay, don't do that. Right. So honestly, I think more of business is like looking at what everybody else is screwing up on and just not doing that. Like that's amazingly, that is a formula for success that people often ignore. Just look at what your competitors are screwing up on. Where are they dropping the ball? And can you pick that ball up and do really well at it? If you can just become the best at that, don't try to knock it out of the park with everything. Just become that best at one thing. Like we said, just say, oh, I can become the best at customer service. Or I can become the best at picking up the phone every time. Or I can become the best at getting you an email within the day with your quote in it or whatever it is. Like there's a lot of simple ways to win. So don't overcomplicate it.
So becoming the best at one thing and delegating the rest. What was that one thing for you in the beginning, in the very beginning?
Oh, I think for me, it was like people were always saying, like, who can solve this? And I would just take on any crazy project. Like, bring me your problem, I'll solve it. Right. And I was like, I don't know what the problem is. It doesn't even matter. I'm just going to figure it out. So that was my one thing is like people would literally, my whole business was built off people just calling me on this. Like it was really just, hey, call Jason, he'll figure it out. And I did. And so
Mm.
we built the entire company off of just solving crazy problems. So it's like start with the end in mind and figure out the process and invent a process or make a process happen.
Yeah, that's so interesting because I was just on a call and then we were talking about, like I was just doing some prep work for this, and we were talking about Tony Robbins. Like who is Tony Robbins, and what does he identify as? Like what is his thing? And then I started thinking, I'm like, okay, Tony Robbins wants to be known as the top person that the top people go to when they need help. That's it.
Yeah.
Like that's it. So like it reminded me what you just said there. It reminded me of that. Like so you were the person that people came to when they needed help, and then you would just figure.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, I think obviously it's different. I'm not in personal development. It's more just, process problems, but pretty much people bring me a problem and I solve it. That's what I do in any area. But we've obviously have done that as far as a business. We do that in process equipment. So,
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So wow. All right. So if you were to boil down, like, all right. So you went from working with this company to then forming your own, and then now you just took off from there. If you were to give that in, put it into like a formula or like a step by step process for somebody else who's working for somebody else and now is ambitious also and then would like to have a similar path, like how would you describe that to that person?
well, first off, let me go back. This is not an overnight process. Like I started that company in 19, and we were doing things that were not in the same industry. We were building like components for other OEMs. So we started out just metal fabrication. We did that for a couple years, and then we started coming out with our own product lines. And that's when I quit the other company because I felt like that was a little bit of a conflict of interest. But honestly, I was living off my real estate at that time. I was basically not taking any money from the company. So I had an income source that was outside of my job, right? So I worked from 2012 to 2019. I worked on building up my real estate portfolio. I actually started probably investing again in 2015. I started investing again and I started buying. I went to a Robert Kiyosaki real estate class and I took their full mentorship program. And I'm like, I'm going to learn how to buy, flip, hold, sell, do options, everything. I'm going to do everything. And so I built that whole asset class and that, basically I built my real estate portfolio to a place where it didn't 100% cover my everything in month and up, but it was pretty close, like 70, 80%. I only had to pull a little bit from the business. So that was a good comfort factor to allow me to actually go in and start my own business. So that's a process. That's not something you just do overnight, right? So there are many right ways. If I had to start over, I'd probably just raise capital and just do it right from the beginning and get a team of advisors that know more than I do about business. And I would just start from the beginning and do it, but that's
how many years did you put into the real estate mastery before all this?
So I was doing, so we had started buying in 2015 and I think in 2018 we bought like 10 and that was a big jump for us, so I think we had probably 25 or so before I had started the business in 2019. So we were up to about 25 properties. And then from there, it was more, we ended up getting up to about 39 or 40 maybe, but we would then sell some off. Like we'd flip a few, I would do 4 or 5 flips a year, maybe on a heavier year, 2 to 3 on a light year. And then that would basically carry me, and then I would put that more money back into more real estate. So I'd always 1031 exchange back into more, 1031 back into more. And I was using, private funding for pretty much all that. So I didn't even have to go to a bank until I was doing it for a long-term rental. Then I would do a buy and hold.
Yeah. But you were in construction before then.
I did have a construction company way back before, like 2004, 2005 to 2008. So I had a construction company in there. So I did have a background in construction. I already knew enough so where I could rehab my own places and all that. So
and that helped tremendously, I bet.
Yeah.
So it really took you from 04, in order to build all that, because if you didn't have the background in construction, then So
people see it as like an overnight success, right? And you're like, well, there was a lot of decades in there. It wasn't just it didn't just happen, right? And so then when I started the company, it was a challenge. It was the biggest challenge I'd ever taken on. Like it was a big challenge. And looking back, I'm like, that was crazy, but we did it. And when we started it right before COVID, right? Like we didn't know COVID was coming. So started in 2019, 2020, COVID comes along. You're like, what did I just sign up for? But thankfully we had a few large jobs that carried us through and, that worked out. So we were able to, so I guess to go back to answer your question, if somebody's looking for a way to start their own business, you need to first learn and become the best at something, whatever that something is, become the best at that, and then turn that into where you're the guy to talk to in the industry, or at least one of the top people. And then from there, you can actually take that and just expand on it,
Okay. What would be the message that, based on all this that we said, like what would be the message that you would want to convey to anybody that wants to listen to Jason?
I think everybody is going to go through loss or pain or grief. For me, whenever I look at, pain is the last teacher, pretty much, right? There's always warnings. There's always other ways of learning. But when you get to, the point of pain, that's the hardest lesson, right? And everybody experiences pain in their life, but learning how to stair step out of grief, stair step out of pain, and find the empowering meaning, that's the key to living a successful life, right? So finding the empowering meaning and be like, what else could this mean? What else could this mean? Ask a different question, you'll get a different answer, and start looking at how can I actually build a life of my dreams the way I want right now? How can I feel and experience that in this moment? When I feel and experience that in this moment, I start to just begin to create that reality, because I think people forget how important their words are. The more you do, especially spiritual practice, the more there's a tendency for your thoughts, your words, for your actions to start materializing in real life, because what you say comes to fruition. What you think comes to fruition. So feeling good right now in this moment, you're actually bringing more of that energy in, and that allows you to start manifesting more beauty and joy in your life.
That's beautiful. I yesterday I went to the grocery store to get some lunch, and when I was walking back home, I met this young man, and he was homeless. He was stinky. His clothes were super dirty, and he just asked me for money. And I was like, "Yeah, I don't have no cash." I was about to walk away, but then I came back and I'm like, "Yo, you want me to just buy you something? I like we could just go to a grocery store real quick." And he's like, "Yeah, sure." So I went to buy him like a meal. He just wanted pizza. I'm like, "Cool." And then I was like, "And hold on one second. Do you need clothes?" I was like, "Let me go grab you some clothes." And he said, "Well, I don't wear pants. He like I just want shorts." And I'm like, well, I only have like two pairs of shorts. So I'm like, I wasn't gonna give him all my shorts, but I said, okay, let me figure something out here. What am I gonna do? So I went to a store and I was like, do you guys have clothes? No. And then I remember I walked by a church earlier. So I just said, let me just go by the church real quick and then see if this could work out. And then I walked in and I spoke to the gentleman there. He's an old man there. He's about 75 years old. And then I was like, hey, I just met this young man and like he looks super ambitious. He's got good intentions. As far as I can tell, could you talk to him? And he's like, sure, I'll talk to him. So then I was like, hey, look, I don't want to walk all the way home, but I found somewhere that, they might be able to help or whatever. And then I started talking to him. I wasn't condescending in any way. I was just like, hey, you need help right now. It doesn't mean gonna need help forever. Like, but you're ambitious, you look like. And he started telling me about like how he's about to start getting involved with the drug trade, and because he has no other options. So I was like, all right, just come with me, and sat down with the gentleman, and he told us our story about how he started with nothing, and now he's like he was able to get work and then started his own businesses and stuff, and now he has like kids and grandkids and great grandkids, and he says he's like, what I'm most proud of, he says, is that all of my kids and all of my grandkids, everybody in my family, they all have a house and a car, and then having him tell him that I couldn't have helped him in that way. So I think what I got from that was, like you said, the spiritual practice. We're at a church, and then we have this gentleman. Like, I have no idea who he is. I just said, all I know is that my father was a pastor. So I was like, hey, look, I think a church would be a great place where like people who need stuff just go there, and then people will help you. I think that's a great place. So then afterwards I was walking with him and I was like, all right, hey, like I was saying goodbye to him. And then I told him, hey, look, man, you're not gonna be able to trust me because you just met me. But like if there's one person you can trust in the world, it's gonna be God,
Mm.
So you always, if you just hang out places where people follow God, then I think all your needs will be met. And then I left. Of course, I felt good after doing that. But then I was like, man, I that could have been me, like very easily, because he had some family stuff. He said his family had a lot of money, and then his mother was sleeping with the driver, and then when his dad died, then it just became like a lot of drama or whatever, and somebody took all the money or whatever. I don't
Mm.
know, but I just realized that that could have been me. Like any
Yeah.
circumstance, it could have been me. And then it reminded me of, there's a therapist that I saw like a while ago, and he told me that he's got this analogy. I don't know if this like a lot of people believe this too, where like before we became human beings, we were in the spiritual world, and before God sent us out, He had us choose our biggest problem, our biggest challenge in the world. So it could be like lack of love, it could be loss of a loved one, it could be just abandonment, just
Mm.
just a really big problem, like a painful thing. And for some, homelessness. That's probably his challenge, you know.
Yeah.
Obviously, you told us like what yours are. Do you subscribe to this at all? Like, do you believe like okay? So then,
I think, there's a book called Journey of Souls that was very impactful for me. And
mhm.
it basically it's like this guy who did hypnosis and talked about past life regressions and stuff. But he basically puts people, there's too many coincidences to be coincidences, right? But it talks about how like everybody goes on the same journey, and it explains the journey of a soul. And so I would highly recommend that for anybody who's inclined that direction. It kind of gives you a good perspective on how we choose before we come down into these physical bodies. This is the incarnated soul, but then we have a higher soul. And so, carne is like meat, right? This is your meat suit, but it's not who you are, right? Like you have a hand. You're not your hand. You have a name. You're not your name. These are things you have. This is not who you are. And so I think people get so caught up in the things that they forget this is not who I am. This is not my experience of life.
And I think this is what you wanted to get into because Maggie told me that you're like he wants to talk about pranic healing. He wants to talk about
Oh
you know.
yeah. Master Code literally changed my life. I tell you, like I am such a supporter of his because especially pranic psychotherapy changed my children's life forever. And then Arhatic yoga, yoga, people get like caught up on like, oh, there's different types of yoga or whatever. I didn't even know there were different types of yoga. I just thought yoga was yoga. But yoga actually means union. That is the definition of yoga. So the higher soul and the incarnated soul becoming one. You want to be able to become one. And so there are different techniques, different breath work, different, some people, there's bhakti yoga, there's hatha yoga, there's all these different types and styles. So there's arhatic yoga, which an arhat is like a very high, spiritual developed person, basically. And it's combining all the different types of yoga into the most condensed version that allows you to connect with your higher soul. And so that was something that Master Choa Kok Sui developed and then taught to Master Ko. And then that has been a big game changer for me also. Like it helped me to have an understanding. I was able to connect with myself a lot more. And it allowed me to have perspective on life that I would not have had otherwise.
Oof. And what is that?
Just your perspective from your higher soul. Like I am not the body. I am not the thoughts. I am not the emotions. I have thoughts. Where did this thought even come from? Am I stopping? It's in the pause. The power is in the pause. The pause between stimulus and response. The pause between action and reaction. Like something happens to you. My famous example I always say is, if I spit in your face, did I make you mad or did I make you wet? Okay. Well, if a baby spits in your face, you're like, oh, it's okay. You're so cute. It still spat in your face. If an adult spits in your face, you choose to get angry, but you chose. The difference between the stimulus and the response is a choice. And you actually get to choose. Oh, this is the action. Now, what is going to be my reaction? What is my response? Right? So you can react or you can respond. And that's, when you choose the reaction, it becomes a response.
Did I make you mad or did I make you wet? I love that. We should start every conversation with that.
Yeah.
Which reminds me of a book that one of my best friends was telling me about. Like one of my mentors in life, he said, man, you got to read this book, man. It's like the Surrender Experiment. And he was like, man, you got to listen to this audiobook. It's like, you got to listen to it because he know that I do a lot of overthinking. And he's like, man, you got to listen to this, man. Just listen. He's like, just listen to this. Just go over there and listen to this. And then I started listening to it, and I listened to it many, many times now. And just like you said, just being able to let go and the way that he describes the voice in the head, where it's like it's not you, but it's not you. It's just there. Like it's a part of you. It's just it's gonna talk. You can
So you
listen
have
to
different
it.
bodies. Like I think this was helpful for me to understand that you have multiple bodies. You don't have just one, right? So you have your physical body, and then you have your energetic body, which is where your chakras live. It's like if you take Kirlian photography, you can see the outline of your body, your energetic body, right? If you cut a leaf in half, you can still see the outline of the leaf with Kirlian photography. Okay. So the energetic blueprint still lives there. That's why people still have phantom pain. If they cut an arm off, they can still feel the phantom pain sometimes. Like, man, my leg itches. Well, you don't have a leg. Well, you do. It's just your energetic body. So learning about the energetic body was pranic healing. Okay. Then in Arhatic yoga, I was able to learn like, okay, not only do you not have one body or two bodies, you have five bodies, maybe, you know, and then there's actually layers within that. But you also have like an astral body, which is where your emotions live. Okay. And there's different layers. There's lower, there's middle, and there's higher astral. And then you have a mental body, which is where your thoughts live. And then you have a spiritual body or the causal body. Okay. So all those combined are things you have still. They are not you. You are the soul. It's connected through a cord that goes to grounding cord and spiritual cord, but that is not you, right? And so your thoughts are formed in the mental body or they're picked up on. You know, Think Get Rich talks about this too. Like the mind, the brain, the mind is a sending and receiving unit, right? The brain is actually just a switchboard. The mind is outside of that. What is the mind, right? Thinking is this process of asking and answering questions. But who's asking the question? Where did this question originate from? Is this my question? Is this my thought? Or did it just float into my field? Or it was put there by my mom? Or it was put there by, you know, who knows what, a friend that was well-meaning, but they put a thought in there and then that thought grew and it became a thought form that kind of has a life of its own. And if you don't control that, or you don't say, well, that's not me, then it's controlling you, right? Advertisers do this all the time. They're creating thought forms that are very powerful, you know, like Coca-Cola or Pepsi or Nike or any of these guys, they're creating thought form, right? So from an energetic perspective, that's a thought form that the more energy goes in, the more power it has, the more draw it has. You know, social media is just, those are just thought forms that they're creating, you know? And so I think understanding that is a big deal. And people, you know, if you don't separate yourself from the thought, then the thought controls you, right? So if you stop and go, that's a crazy ass thought. Where did that come from? You know, you recognize it and you're like, that's not even my thought. I didn't even think that. Where did that come from? And the other times for me, it was most powerful when I recognized, no, that is definitely my thought. I did create that. Then I'm like, wow, I am powerful. I need to be careful with this. You know, the Bible says too much is given, much is required. Well, this is it. The more you tend to, the more powerful you are, right? So you're a being of divine intelligence, divine will, and divine love. Okay. So divine power and divine will, you put those in. If you don't have the love aspect, it's not going to be very balanced, right? But the more power and the more will you have, the more what you say has a tendency to materialize. The more what you think has a tendency to materialize. So that's that great power that comes with great responsibility. You have to start being careful. Man, I shouldn't be saying anything, even jokingly, because, you know, I mean, that's where the word spelling comes from. You're casting a spell and you know, like you're literally putting that thought out there, boom, but you're casting a spell for yourself for good or for bad. So you got to be careful because it's a two-edged sword, and just be very careful with what you say, with what you think, with what you put out there. Like, I don't even joke. Like, if my children say a joke about money or something, I'm like, no, we're not saying that at all. Like, you don't ever say we're poor. No, you say, you know, the money is coming or something like, but you cannot ever throw that out there to the universe, you know?
You know, it reminds me of when I wanted to be a rapper, when I was like 15, 16, and
Yeah.
I had a little studio set up in my closet, and then I would like be like recording in my room in my closet. My mom would like knock on the door sometimes. She would hear me say something crazy, and she'd be like, da 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 da. He's like, what are you saying? He's like, why are you saying that? And I was like, Mom, leave me alone, you know? But I think as a spiritual person, she has that knowledge where like she knows that the words do matter. Like the messages that we're expressing out there, they're so important. Is this what you want to talk about like moving forward, like, you know, for your, you know, like when you're doing podcasts and stuff, is this what you want to
You
start?
know, I'm pretty diverse. I can talk about anything, but you know, I think this is the part that has impacted me the most because I was not a, you know, so a quote unquote spiritual person, right? Like I grew up in church, but I was very much like, I'm just going to check these boxes and move on with life. I was a very logical person. And for me, understanding the spiritual aspects of life has been just astounding. It's very life. So I think that's the part that's made the greatest impact in my life. Therefore, that's the part that I would like to see people embrace because I want them to have a great impact, you know, in their life.
Yeah, and I think it's the part that most people miss because they're like, especially if, like you said, like that gentleman that I helped yesterday, he's probably not thinking about, you know, he's like, where can I get my next meal? You know, where can I get my
We're all
next
at different
shower?
levels on different things. Problems never go away. I think people have a myth in their mind. They're like, as soon as I'm rich, I'm not going to have any problems. I'm like, no, you're going to have bigger problems. They're just going to be different, right? And I gladly will take those problems because I'm like, okay, I'm just at a new level. Like I never ask for an easier life. I ask that I can become better to be able to take on whatever it is, you know?
Yes, yes. And I think the blessing I have is, you know, growing up in church, I have the blessing of something that my parents instilled in me since I was little, and that I don't know if how this came about, but whenever I'm in trouble, whenever I feel at my lowest, I always know where to go. And that's
Yeah, but
spirituality.
the point would be that is good. That is good. But to go to greatness or outstanding or at least excellence, it
Mm,
needs to be part of your daily schedule, right?
mm,
So just putting it in your calendar, not just in times of trouble, put it in your calendar where you start to make it part of your daily life. Like I'm just going to make sure, like when I said you're on coast mode, maybe you're meditating once a day and you're just doing a 15-minute boom, something, right? That's a part of the discipline of spirituality where you're saying like
mm.
I'm going to discipline myself to just show up every day and make sure that I am completing something in this area because if not, I'm going to feel unbalanced. I'm going to feel like I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do, you know?
So that would be your message. That would be, hey, let's make spiritual practice a daily habit.
Well, I think everything. So I have my 8S: faith, family, finances, fitness, following, freedom, friends, and fun. Okay. So in each of those 8 areas, I think it's important to find a way to get that in your calendar. So that way, like I need to schedule time with my family. Like if I don't put it in my schedule, it's not going to happen. Right. I need to schedule time with my friends. I need to schedule time to make sure that I am showing up at the gym. I need to schedule time in my calendar where I'm making sure that I am doing something spiritual, right? Something in my faith life. I need to make sure that I'm scheduling time to have fun. Like I need to go fly an airplane or, go out on a boat or something or travel, like there's got to be something in your calendar that's like, oh, that looks fun. I'm going to do that. And so all of those areas, like I said, you don't have to be focused on all of them, but you need to have that in your calendar where you're at least maintaining, okay, I'm going to check all these boxes so I know that I'm feeling whole and complete as a human at the end of the week.
Mm. And that's daily or weekly.
Weekly, but I mean, I think there are certain aspects you just have to do every day. Like fitness, you can have a cheat day or whatever, but for me, I think I want to maintain the level of outstanding in my fitness. So I'm like, I got to do something every day. So I run a 5K every day, no matter what. And then as far as, going to the gym, I'm there at least 5 days a week is my outcome. So there are some weeks if I'm traveling, I can only hit 2 or 3 days a week and I feel behind, but I don't beat myself up because I'm like, okay, I'm still doing a 5K every day. I'm still showing up 3 days a week. I didn't hit five, but whatever, like I still have that grace, but I'm putting it in my calendar to show up every day.
Okay. So I think to close out, how do we stack these in a way that works? Like for example, I know you said like overlapping, like you do like when you would be playing with your kids, that's family time, and then you would be eating while you're doing that. So give me a picture of how you would stack these 8 things in your week.
Yeah, so I do a, Sunday night game plan with my assistant. We go through and we put everything in my calendar. And now it's pretty easy because it's like you're going to go to the gym at this time. You're going to, like we have the base level stuff that's in there no matter what, right? Like that's just always in there. When I first started filling that out, it was a lot more difficult. But now I wouldn't say it was difficult. It just took discipline to make it happen, right? Now I'm at a point where I'm like, okay, I'm going to the gym at this time every day. I'm gonna, get my 5K in first thing in the morning. Like I just have my routine of what I do. And then I come back and I cook breakfast. And, if I have the boys, I cook them breakfast and we talk for a few minutes or whatever. And then, I be sure to schedule time at lunch. I schedule time at dinner where we put all the iPads down, no technology, and we just talk, right? And you spend that time. And it's simple to do. It's easy to do. It's easy not to do. But if you schedule, you're like, hey, it's time for lunch. Everybody put your stuff down. Let's sit down. Let's talk. Like, what's going on? How's your day going? Like, what have you been working on this morning? Those things are invaluable. Those little moments stack, right? And so when you're asking about how can you stack your calendar at the week outset, if you know you're not going to have your kids, you're not going to have that. But maybe you're then scheduling, hey, I need to do a lunch with this friend. I haven't talked to them in a month. I need to do whatever. Like, put that in your calendar so you can still check all those boxes and meet all those needs, because those are your human needs, right? You have to meet those needs, and you got to figure out healthy ways to meet the needs, or you will find an unhealthy way to meet that need. So you've got to figure out ways to put in your calendar to make sure that you're meeting your needs in a healthy way.
Because you're still going to meet the needs, because they're needs. You need to meet them.
Right. So you need certainty, you need variety, you need love and connection. You're going to have to meet your need for significance somehow. So you can do it by either holding the gun to somebody's head, or you can do it by giving away a kidney, or whatever. Like, there's so many ways that you can meet your need for significance. Maybe you need to spend some time, with a charitable organization. Like, I have a call right after this with an orphanage, where we donated some rice, and it's going to be so good. Like, it's going to fill my heart at such a level that it's just like, boom, 10 out of 10, instantaneously. So it makes me feel good. And that's in my calendar. I've scheduled that time to make sure that I'm stopping, I'm seeing the need. And then that's going to drive me to do more of that. Now I can give back more. I can find more ways to help them. I can be like, oh, you know what? I didn't even think about this person. I should connect you with this guy, because then he can, help you with the beans instead of the rice or whatever. There's so many different things that you can do, but if you don't schedule that time, it doesn't stack in the right direction. And then you're going to be like feeling so like you're a taker instead of a giver, and then it just goes down this negative spiral. So you've got to schedule the time to make sure that you are building out your calendar to match your priority list. Because if you don't match your priority list, it's just going to feel very unfulfilling.
Where can people find you?
So on Instagram and YouTube, Jason Shipley Official is my hashtag or whatever. And then YouTube, I also have Midwest Custom Engineering. We actually have a lot more followers on that, because we do some funny, crazy commercials sometimes. And then that's also where we host, and both of them, actually, I have my Made in America Reawakened episodes. On any of those, you can find our links to everything else. So
beautiful.
Yeah.
All right, Jason, thank you so much for your time. It's been great. I'm definitely gonna do that with my assistant. I want to be like, okay, let's schedule out, boom,
absolutely,
at the beginning of the week.
Absolutely, man.
So
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. We'll talk next time.
Okay, man. Thank you so much. Have a good one.
Yeah. Step in, wipe your feet, this a focus zone. White belt tied tight, but my mind fully grown. Bow to the moment, sensei say be here. I silence the noise, make the vision real clear. Phone face down, I don't scroll, I don't slip. While they thumb through distractions, I sharpen the grip. One target, one flame, let it burn in the dark.